Welcome to the Mentors and Moguls podcast, your source for the inside scoop from some of the world's most accomplished business leaders, athletes, and creatives on how they've achieved success. I'm Heather Stone, a serial entrepreneur with a passion for helping others to overcome challenges and discover their untapped potential. Join me and our guests as we teach you how to break through those barriers on the way to crushing your goals. In each episode, I dive into a new topic with an inspiring mentor to find out exactly how they overcame obstacles, slayed self-doubt, and achieved their goals. Today's expert mentoring session is about to start, so grab your pen and let's dive in. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, aviation. When you settle in the back of your airliner, you ever wonder who's sitting up front in the left seat? Well, our next guest is about to share a little bit about her background. We're talking to a great first officer, Wendi Sparks. Hello, Wendi. Thank you so much for joining us today on our podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. How is it going today?
Hi, Heather. It's great to be here. It's going well here. Thank you.
Let's dive in. Tell our listeners a little bit about the most attractive aspect of your job.
Well, there's many attractive aspects to my job. The first and foremost is that I absolutely love flying. I'll have days maybe I don't want to go to work or something's going on with my family. But the minute I get in the airplane and start flying, I'm happy to be there and I love it. And I think that's a wonderful thing to have in a job, to truly just love what you do. But I also get to see the world. I believe traveling is the best education you can get. And I have been very lucky to see many places in this world and many cultures.
Oh, that's terrific. I know that I'm a little bit envious. You've seen so many other places I'd love to go to. We'll get to that in a second. Now, coming up, did you have a mentor or a role model in your career in aviation, or did you blaze a new trail?
Well, I initially I did not have anybody to have a role model towards. I was very lucky that a family friend took me up in an airplane when I was young, and I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. Later on, when I went to college, I had several women that were a couple of years, ahead of me that I was able to use as a role model to get advice from and lean on. But it wasn't until later that I was an adult that I was introduced and had more role models as women to follow.
You just brought up a very good point. I do a lot of work with children. I know a lot of other organizations that we work with do a lot of work with children. And some people say, can you really make an impact on a child by introducing them to, let's say, building robots or even walking through an airplane or sitting in a flight sim or something like that? But apparently you are living proof that definitely made an impression on you at some point in your young life.
Oh, it definitely did. The friend sat me up on a telephone book and gave me the controls and let me do some turns. And that was it. It was such an impression. I've also witnessed it firsthand going to air shows and showing young women, young children, period, the airplane, letting them climb in the cockpit, showing them what different things do. And you can just see in some of those children's eyes how much they are just amazed by it. Yeah, it definitely makes a huge difference showing them different possibilities.
Okay, I love that. I was reading some statistics about female pilots in particular in the U.S. and abroad. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's probably just about 4.4% of pilots in the U.S. are female and just a touch less in the United Kingdom and around the world. Maybe it's even less. What do you have to say about that? Do you see more and more women joining the field, or is this really a male-dominated field and it's not going to change?
It's definitely a male-dominated field. I did look at the numbers, again before today, just to make sure. And you're correct, 4.4% of all the airline transport pilots in the U.S. That's the highest rating that you can receive, and that's what all professional pilots have. 4.4% is women. I believe that when I started flying in 1991. That number was 3.9 to 4%. So it has not changed very much at all in 20 years or 30 years, actually. I'm getting older than I think I am. It's very surprising. But I also do believe that more and more women are starting to fly. I have a very close family that we're friends with, and their daughter is is in an aviation program here in Georgia. And she's telling me there's maybe 3 to 5 girls in her class out of 25 boys, which is way more than when I went through it. And I think if you read the statistics, I think it is increasing, and that that number will grow shortly, I hope.
Are there any efforts made by the big airlines, the commercial airlines, encouraging women to apply? Does that seem to be a push? Does that exist out there in the aviation world?
It does exist. United Airlines is probably one of the leaders in trying to get a diverse pilot group as well as employee group, period. And so they certainly do show up at conventions like the Women in Aviation International Convention. I don't know if you know that, but that is a great resource for women. They provide scholarships, networking opportunities, and they meet once a year. And then there's an online presence. So that's a great resource for women. And United and the other airlines show up for that to help promote it. I believe in the hiring process. I'm sure I don't have any factual information, but they definitely screen for women and try to get, a certain percentage of women in there to interview.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. What are some of the qualities or characteristics you think that someone needs to become a pilot, male or female? Any special attributes or character traits that are really best suited for a career in aviation?
Yes. I truly believe that anybody that wants to do something can go out and do it. If you love something and you truly want it and you're willing to work hard for it, you definitely can become a pilot. Absolutely. I think as far as pilots go, we're very methodical kind of people. If you talk to get a focus group of pilots together, you'll find all of us are very methodical. We use checklists in the cockpit, and I think that carries over into our lives. And very goal-oriented kind of people. I think another attribute, but something that can be learned, is, we can remain calm. We're trained to have pressure in the simulator and the airplane. And so we're also can remain calm in an emergency situation. But again, a lot of that can be taught and learned. But I do believe that maybe just a methodical personality, a little bit type A personality, very goal-oriented person would be a great pilot.
Okay. I've noticed that with a lot of pilots that I've flown with, that I always say I'd like to fly with someone who is a aviation geek, because
Yes.
they like to go through that. I love it when I watch them go through the checklists, and they can't be disturbed, quite obviously, but they are ridiculously stringent on those checklists. And the more of a geek on those things, forgive the word, the better I feel sitting in the back seat. So I love that. Always helps to be very calm. How do you handle situations, when you're teaching people in the flight sim, how do they give you maybe unusual situations to test your level of panic or kind of desensitize you from getting panicked in an emergency situation?
I don't think that they do anything to test how we handle it. I mean, well, just to see particular how we handle it. But in the simulator, when we go in to do training every 9 months, we are given emergency situations, for a couple hours at a time. So I believe that we're given checklists, we're given all the tools that we need to handle it. That's how we learn to maybe remain calm and kind of just depend on our knowledge and our training when we're in a situation like that.
Which is perfect. So you can say, okay, I've done this before, at least in a sim. I've done this before. We've walked through it. I've practiced this. And it's not the first time you've seen a lot of the situations you have in the sky, big or small, right?
Absolutely. And then it just goes back to what you're saying, the kind of a geeky aviator. We are constantly looking for new knowledge. So we want to learn from mistakes made by others so that we don't make the same mistakes. So we're constantly learning. This is not a career where you start off and then you can just sit back. It's a constant learning situation for us.
Right, right. Well, that's great. I know you're constantly going through accreditation or new training. I know that that's a part of every pilot's career. So once you learn it, you don't just stay. You have to go. Do you have to get recertified or continued training every year as a pilot?
Yeah, so we go back every year, 9 months at the airlines for, like I said, the recurrent training where they put us through the hoops with all the emergencies they can come up with, as well as some training in the classroom just to revisit the airplane and the things that we know, just to make sure that we have all the new information and that we've retained everything else that we have. So yes, it's never a complacent career for learning and studying.
Oh, that's great. Well, it keeps you on your toes. So let's talk about the learning. Take it one step further. I don't know how you could have prepared for 9/11. I believe you were flying during that time. You were a pilot during that time for commercial airlines. Talk a little bit about that. Where were you on 9/11 and did that affect you?
Yes, I was flying. I had flown the day before from the East Coast to the West Coast on the very same airplane that they flew into the towers, the 757.
Hmm.
So I was in LA at the hotel asleep when the first plane crashed. And you're right. I don't think there was any way that any of us could prepare for it. It was completely different than anything we had ever seen, and the airlines and the country, of course, everyone has had to quickly try to adapt to what has happened.
So was a lot changed? I know we had the cockpit doors and new procedures and whatnot, but as a pilot sitting in the front left seat or right seat for that matter, did your processes change dramatically? And I assume all of those processes are still in place.
Yes, to some point. I mean, as far as flying the airplane, that's all the same, but we definitely have the locked cockpit doors now, different security procedures in place, in case something does happen. And I think we're all much more vigilant about it and think about it, even to this day. And I know, it's quite some time has passed now, but when we're flying and we come out of the cockpit, we're all the flight attendants, the pilots, it's very sobering and we're still very vigilant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's pivot a little bit and say, who could have prepared us or ever thought that we would be dealing with the situation we're in now, where a lot of the flights are canceled or grounded until further notice. Everyone's kind of in self-containment for 15 days. COVID-19 is here. So how does that feel as a pilot? There's something else to pivot with. Do you feel safe flying? Has everything changed quite a bit, or are we just so new into it that you're not really sure how this is going to affect the pilots and aviation going forward?
Yeah, I think we're definitely this is still very new, even though we all feel like we've been in our homes for quite some time.
Right.
There's a lot of anxiety, obviously. We're all doing the best we can to do our social distancing, but pilots are still, even though flights are very much reduced right now, pilots are still having to go out there. They're considered essential employees for these states that are on lockdown. We have letters that we carry around with us in case we are pulled over to show that we're supposed to be out and allowed to travel to the airport. There's a lot of anxiety, but for everyone right now, right? It's as different than 9/11 as far as that we 4 to 5 days there were no flights in the US. This is we don't even know the amount of time that these flights are going to be reduced. Most of the airlines have cut back to, gosh, the number changes so much, but I'm going to say 70 to 80% right now. International flying is probably around 90-95% down. So I think it's yet to be seen what this is going to do to the airline and all the employees.
Right, right. And I know that a big part of your flight pattern is over to Europe, correct? You do a lot of international flights, so that's drastically altered your schedule these days, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, this month I was actually on vacation, so I only did one flight this month, and luckily I was able to stay out of everything that's going on. And then the airline has offered leaves of absence for next month. They offer, it's called a surplus reduction line.
Mm.
So for those of us that were able to get that, we get partial pay and won't go to work. So I won't fly for United next month either.
Okay. Well, that's good for you. Unfortunately, there are some pilots that have to fly, so they're trying to keep their distance. Is it possible to keep your distance when when you're in the pilot lounge and then you have to go in a hotel somewhere and spend the night and then fly back? Wow, that's a whole nother list of problems to be solved.
It is, and there's even more than just that. You want to stay away, you're trying to keep yourself clean, but then a lot of the hotels, it's hard to get food now because a lot of the restaurants are shutting down.
Mm.
So pilots that I've talked to are carrying food with them. Before they're going on trips, they're finding out what the situation is at whatever hotel. The hotels are changing daily, I would imagine. on what hotel they're usually staying at, because some are shutting down, some are, closing. So there's a lot of anxiety right now, but I think that the pilots that are flying now also understand that there's a need. The airlines are still carrying cargo that's needed, medical supplies, just different supplies that the country needs. They're also still trying to do rescue flights in different countries to get citizens that are out of the country that have gotten stuck by this back home. So I think they realize that they are providing an essential service, and they're doing something good. And so they feel like it is definitely worth going out and trying to do that. But you're right. There's a lot of challenges and things to think about before they go.
Wow. Wow. My hat's off to the pilots that are out there flying. That's really selfless and amazing. I know that you've done some work for Gulfstream in the past. Tell us a little bit about what you've done for Gulfstream, and tell us how that differs a little bit from being a commercial pilot for one of the major airlines.
Although I'm still flying airplanes, it's like in a completely different career. So after September 11th, the airline reduced in size quite a bit, and I was furloughed, which is where they let you go, but you keep a number, and when they're ready, or if you want to go back to them, you can at a later date. So I was furloughed in 2002, and lucky enough to be hired by Gulfstream Aerospace, the manufacturer. They make corporate jets. And I spent 16 years there and loved every minute of it. I did demonstration flights where I flew all over the world, all over the country, everywhere, showing the aircraft to potential customers. And I spent a couple years as a production test pilot there, where I flew the new airplanes and checked them out before we delivered them to customers.
That sounds very exciting. And I think you did a stint in Hong Kong. Is that correct?
Yes, with Gulfstream, we moved to Hong Kong and lived there for almost 4 years, from 2012 to 2016. My daughter and I, helping the customers over on that side of the world, and that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life, and I'm very grateful for it.
Well, would you encourage someone else coming up behind you to say yes if they ever got an opportunity like that to go overseas and be an expat with a corporation?
Absolutely. Our vice president of flight operations at Gulfstream, when we decided to do that, and I was meeting with him, he said something to me, and it stayed with me. He said, "This will change the trajectory of your daughter's life." My daughter was 8 at the time. Mm-hmm. And, I thought that was very nice of him to say that at the time. But when we came back, I realized that he was correct, that provided her and I so many opportunities, so much learning, such a different lifestyle, that I do believe it'll change the trajectory of what her life would have been and now, and I think for the better. So I definitely would encourage it. It's scary to do at first, but it was definitely worthwhile. And I met many, many expats over there, and I think they almost to a person felt the same way.
Right. Well, I did the same with my family overseas. And some people were scratching their heads saying, why in the world would you go overseas? And I said, are you kidding me? Why not? And my children are living proof that now they say, I can do anything anywhere in the world that I want. I watch my parents do it, and I can do the same. It just opens up your world and your perspective, right?
That's exactly right. It opens up the world. Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So talking about your daughter, so I would imagine that there is a little bit of a balancing act that you've got, having a daughter and having a job flying airplanes overseas. Are you able to manage that? Was it difficult to find that balance, or did you just naturally step right into it?
I wish I could say I naturally stepped into it. It has definitely been and still is a constant balancing act. I think for all working mothers, this is a very difficult thing. Absolutely. And I am no exception. I've had a lot of help. I have a great family. When we moved to Hong Kong, we had a wonderful lady that moved in with us and helped then. As my daughter grows and changes and her needs change, I think I have constantly tried to find a better place or position in whatever job I was doing. So, for example, when I was working for the manufacturer at Gulfstream, I stopped doing demo for a while and went to test, because I was trying to be home more as she went into those early teenage years. Mm-hmm. And then later going on to United, trying to, again, balance my schedule and be home and be here for those really important times. So yes, it's a constant balancing act. And I've been extremely lucky that I've had jobs that have been very flexible, and I've had the opportunity to change as I needed to as she grew.
Oh, you're lucky. Well, that's great. I know that where there's a will, there's a way. Sometimes it takes a few more steps. Are there any other areas in the aviation industry, if there's anyone listening right now, particularly a woman listening or a young girl saying, I would like to get into aviation, maybe I don't want to be a pilot. Are there any other avenues that you would say would be perfect for someone that wants to maybe be more stationary in their position? What else can they do in the aviation field as a career?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'll start with the airline. Try to think of it as I think of the job. But there's air traffic controllers. That's stationary. There's dispatchers. Those are the people that do our flight plans at the airline, and we coordinate with for weather and flight information. And even as we're flying, going across the ocean, we're in constant communication with them, and they are helping us. So they're very much part of the flight and part of our trip. There's many jobs at the airline in management, human resources that I can think of that are all a vital part of the airline. And Gulfstream and the manufacturer, that opened my eyes up to many opportunities. Of course, aerospace engineers, there are a constant need for engineers in all different departments and skills that women can be part of, designing airplanes, fixing, coming up with a fix for an airplane. It's amazing. Also, something I didn't know about until I got to Gulfstream is the human factors engineering side of it, where they would call me in to sit in a new aircraft that they were considering, and the human factors engineers were, put your hand here, does this work for you? As far as, can you reach everything? Does this make sense? That was very fascinating to me. I think that's been one of the few times that I thought, if I didn't fly, if there was something else I would want to do, it would be probably in the human factors engineering section. Again, they had dispatchers there. There's just a ton of opportunity, honestly.
Well, that's very good to know. And I know you can make a great living, obviously, engineers, but all of those other areas you mentioned, you can make a great living as a woman or a man working for the airline. So that's really good that you brought that up. Do you think that your daughter has she shown any interest in aviation, or is it like, yeah, mom does that, I'm going to go left, she's going right?
Yeah, it's more of she goes left, I go right, or different. She does not have any interest. Not that I was trying to push her towards aviation, but because as a child, it moved me so much, that experience flying the airplane. I thought that it would be a very cool experience for her. So when she was 7, I took her up in a small plane and I let her fly it. And she wasn't impressed. About 5 minutes into it, she looked at me and said, "Okay, that's fine. Can we go back now?" And it deflated me some, just because I wanted to give her that great experience. But no, she's not. She's not interested. She doesn't think it's special. She knows a ton of pilots. She doesn't understand it being something special or anything different than what other people do. She actually is very creative. She's
Okay.
amazing. She possibly wants to be a fashion designer or some kind of design, maybe interior design. We don't know. We'll see. But she's very creative and she's very talented. So I look forward to finding out what she does.
Well, she could throw that into designing the interiors of the Gulfstreams or the airplanes, because there is a big need for that. So you never know, but I totally understand.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't thought of that, but that's I should take her over there to the design center at Gulfstream and get them to show it to her.
You never know. You never know. Well, you've had the great opportunity to fly all over the world. Can you tell me, where is your favorite city that you have visited while flying? Any place, any route that you love the best, if you could pick one?
I know, Heather, people ask me this all the time, and that is so hard. I really, honestly, I've tried to nail it down, and I can't tell you one place.
Top three?
Okay, so I love Asia. We lived in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a wonderful city. Currently at United, I fly a lot of European routes. So probably I'll say my 2 favorite there are Lisbon, Portugal. I love Portugal, and Geneva, Switzerland.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Well, this is great. What's your mantra? Do you have a mantra when you fly, or when you some days you just don't want to get up? You'd rather stay home with your daughter. You've got to go, obviously. Do you have a mantra that helps you out when maybe times are tough or you're struggling with another situation? A mantra that you live by?
I don't have a mantra really as far as getting myself to work. When things get overwhelming, when it's hard here and it's hard to leave, I try to just remind myself to take it one step at a time. And I think that goes back to the methodical checklist kind of personality, because I know no matter how big things get, if I just take it one step at a time, it lightens the load for me, and it makes the path to the other side more clear. If I let everything, the entire weight of a situation, come on me, then that can overcome me. So I try to just think, what's the first step I need to do, and that seems to get me through everything. And the other thing is that I know no matter how hard it is, as soon as I get in the cockpit and I take off, I love, at the end of the day, I love what I'm doing.
That's great. That's great. Well, I love all of your input, and hopefully that there is someone, a boy or a girl out there listening, and they'll take a second look at a career in aviation, because I know you love it. You light up when we talk about it. So thank you so much for joining us today and sharing some of your insights, and we'll check in with you later after this whole ordeal is over and see what's changed.
Okay, I would like that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather.
Bye-bye. That's all for this week. Thank you for listening to the Mentors and Moguls podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a minute to rate and review the Mentors and Moguls podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find bonus video episodes at mentorsandmogulspodcast.com, or check out our events page and our blog at heatherrstone.com. Until next time, make it a great day.